Hey friends and family, my name is Skylent, using the webcam so that we have this human connection. Hopefully you guys hear my emotion and feel that, I don't know, whatever. I mean what I say, and I'm trying to be humble about all this, and I'm trying to show you where I'm coming from, literally. So look at my face, look who I am. I'm a cis, straight, pervy, lewd, normal, American, big boy, I don't know, blonde. So that's where I'm coming from, but at the same time, as I guess gender normative as I might appear and seem, I collect stuffed animals, I paint my nails, I can be incredibly effeminate, I can be fun in so many different ways with so many different personalities. And that's because over the years, I've played so many of different roles or classes, or read so many different manga, watched so many different TVs, and I've allowed myself to build my character by putting myself in the shoes of many other characters, or building different characters as well, even if I do have the choice of different sexes, different races, things like that. And being able to see the world from different viewpoints has allowed me to have obviously a wider view of the world, and then also to be able to have a wider view and a larger perspective on where I fit in everything and how I want to present myself. And that can change every single day as well. And I can build myself every day. So immediately you might have clicked on this video because you have a general hate for gender lock classes. But I just want to say, please overcome that. But yeah, we are talking about gender lock classes. How realistic is that in these games in terms of taking real world stuff and things and bringing it even to the fantasy world? You know, it doesn't even make sense in their worlds. Would it make sense in our world? Historically, what has been the case for stuff and things, roles and the women have in like military conflict, stuff like that. So yeah, generally we are talking about combat, talking about action RPGs, MMO, games that have classes, but they generally lock them to a sex. And immediately I just kind of want to throw this out here, guys, is that, for the West, which is funny, the West really invented this idea of different classes, pen and paper role-playing games. We created this idea of role-playing, playing a role with vastly crazy different characters, different races, and we're totally cool with, okay, the dwarf is the paladin, or the ogre is the berserker, or whatever. But then it gets really sensitive, it seems, in the modern day, especially with Eastern games being so prevalent. A main example being BDO, which is going to be the gameplay in the background, having sex-locked classes. Because it's like, oh, inequality, equality, what's there to debate? Some people aren't quite aware. And it's really funny, and I'm just going to kind of give you a history of me and my perspective, but I'm somebody who could only play RPGs if the character kind of seemed like me or it really looked like me. So I could play Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, and 10, but I genuinely had a very hard time playing 10, 2, and Final Fantasy 13. But I eventually did, and I was able to, grow my character from there. I had a lot of issues playing fighting games. I could only play like Street Fighter. I could only play Ken. I could not play Chun-Li or Blanca or anything else because it just didn't feel like me. In MOBAs, I could play Warwick, right? Maybe I could play Warwick or Ezreal. But, if I just stuck to that mentality of only playing characters that I could insert myself into or just look like me and acted like me, then I wouldn't be me today, honestly. So before we go much deeper, I just want to ask you guys, broaden your horizons, get over the hang up of thinking of this as like just a net negative, because especially Eastern games are really realize that these characters, they are a little bit more stuck. I mean, mechanically, the kits are generally locked. We call them classes, but generally the customization is pretty limited. They have their own unique backstories, their own unique perspectives, and the way you play the game kind of says something different about you. You might find something very different about yourself when you play them. A great example is that mechanically, Ezreal is nothing like my playstyle. That is nothing like me. The gameplay, the personality is not me. However, Yasuo is. Yeah, Yasuo is so similar to really how I feel, how I like the aggression, the uproariousness of it, the ridiculousness of it, and the constant just agility. That is more, that aggression is definitely more my style. Even though he doesn't look like me, Ezreal looks and acts in terms of personality much more like me. But no, I'll play Yasuo. And maybe similar in Street Fighter, there's a character that is more similar to me than Ken. In Smash Bros, I don't play Lucas or I don't play Cloud. I play Ridley. Though he's a monster, so I guess that doesn't count. But actually, I play a lot of Corrin, you know, and a lot of characters that just don't look like me, but mechanically they have things that I really identify with. So, you know, gameplay I think should come first when we do look at games. So first and foremost, we should be aware that these are video games. Not only are they fantasy, but they are video games. So certain characters maybe are locked to being a gender, especially like in Overwatch, because you want to have somebody who is generally thinner, smaller, more agile, and that is women. A women's silhouette is like that. So that's, you know, Widowmaker, Tracer, you know, especially Sombra, who I play a ton. I love Sombra. I actually got a Sombra poster somewhere that's signed. I love the characters of Overwatch, and most people do. But yeah, you do have characters that have certain silhouettes and gameplay mechanics, like Torbjorn being smaller hitbox, Roadhog being this big old boy, and then you do have some that seemingly break the boundaries, like Zarya. Now, how realistic or not is that? I actually think is incredibly realistic, but we're going to get into something that might seem opposite to that very quickly. But yeah, you do have gameplay reasons why you might have locked classes, and especially when we go to RPGs, MMOs, stuff like that. You know, there is a story, there's a reason, there's a locked kit. It's a game, but it's also fantasy. And fantasy, we love to role play. We love choices. So whether you want to identify as yourself or not, maybe that's actually the opposite. Maybe you see a character, maybe you are a big titty goth girlfriend, and the only class that you really want to play is the Scythe class, but she's a big titty goth. And you actually don't want to play as yourself. You don't want to give the appearance that you're trying to, you just picked it for, you know, the self-reflection. Maybe you wanted to play like an edgy emo boy. You know, maybe you just wanted that role play. Or maybe you have dysphoria. You don't really feel like yourself. Or you just, in the moment, you don't want to play yourself. I do that all the time in games now, even though historically I didn't. So, you know, that's why I play a lot of girls in a lot of games, whether I have the choice or not. So, you know, sometimes it's just about choice. We see this a lot in D&D. Sometimes, you know, we are humans. We're not elves. We're not orcs. We're not, you know, bugbears, things like that. But sometimes we want to play. We want to have that, because sometimes that cutting parts of ourselves off, or just having these incredibly extra elements, maybe it reveals more of our humanity. Some people could debate maybe that kobolds are probably one of the most human races out there. I think in a lot of ways, they actually do represent a core facet of humanity. Anyways. So lacking that choice definitely sucks. Mechanically and in terms of roleplay, it kind of can suck. But there are reasons why they do lock it. And I do think you should overcome the hurdle and play the games anyways. But I totally see your point. So why do they do it? Is it even realistic? What's going on here? Okay. So firstly, I've actually talked to a lot of developers. I've flown out there and played a lot of these games. And immediately, you know, they will voice concerns that the West is not very comfortable, which we kind of just talked about for a little bit here. Not very comfortable with gender lock classes, so they're thinking about adding it. But for the most part, originally the concept, or when they start games, is that it costs money, guys. You know, a man's physical appearance, their silhouette, their animations are going to be different. Sometimes vastly so, with physics and the plot. Okay, so, you know, you want to have different armors, different customizations. Obviously, the paper doll, which if you guys don't know what paper doll is, come on. Anyways, it's like the loadout, it's the equipment. So, you know, when you put on an armor to a guy, it's going to fit very different between a man and a girl. And that's often why you don't see too many different races in a lot of games too. Or if you do, the races are very similar, especially look at something like Elder Scrolls Online. The silhouettes for every race is almost the same. One might have a big lizard tail, one might have like a tiger face, but generally the skeleton and all the animations are actually the same. So it's basically a development time and resource money issue. That really goes into it. But then sometimes it's like Overwatch, where that is specifically, or like Team Fortress 2 or fighting games, there is a very specific balancing or concept or story in mind. And so that's why they do it. But either way, you know, development time or otherwise, when it's put into the game and the classes they choose, it does seem like there is a trend of the classes that they do make men or women. And I think that definitely has to do with history, but it's not always the case, actually. So let's talk about that. Often inside of games, the girl will be like the witch, And then also we have the men will be the berserker. I think those are the two polar opposites that we generally see. Now, in modern day, witches are seen as something effeminate, but actually, I think the very first historical text of witches, in a religious sense, biblically, it also was men. It's men, and then there was like this huge propaganda thing, the witch burnings, which was actually way more horrific than you guys. You need to look up some documentaries on it. It is tragic what happened. Just horrible religious propaganda that just tried to wipe fucking women off the face of the planet. It was ridiculous. Very sad. But anyways, witches became an effeminate thing, and now it's almost like it's a symbol of power. Witches are very popular in modern day. Wicca is a very popular, fun thing to do. But then also berserkers for men. Men are berserkers because men are big and strong. And that's just how historically we've done it. Men are mostly the military force. Men are the ones who are in the the knights, the big strong brutes, the boys. And it's just generally known that men are stronger than women. And hopefully you do realize that men are physically different from women, and men are physically stronger. And by what percentage? If you actually look at the failure rate of certain military tests, acceptance into the military, generally it seems like for most things, women, it's like 80%. 80% of women fail the tests. So you have 20% of women I'm really pulling this out of my butthole, high production value, can't you tell? And so about 20% of women can compete with the average man. So this is kind of like the top 20% of women can begin to kind of compete with the average man. But in terms of peak performance, stuff like that, no, they cannot compete. Occasionally a woman, like you say in a sword fight or something like that, or certain specific sports, a woman might be able to touch the face of God, I guess. But it is incredibly stark. It's to the point where basically if a man a boy goes through puberty, they become drastically, significantly stronger, faster, basically better at physical feats. However, we could debate actually about gymnastics. There are certain things that women are better at than men. And that even goes with mental capabilities, though that's generally on average. Our brains are pretty similar, but physically, men totally different from women, and that's just because of our sex. Literally, the woman sex and the man sex coming together, make a baby, demonetize, whatever. But this is just the reality of it is, you have wider hips as women, so you can't run as long, apparently. Some other factors go into that. You can't be as strong. Definitely the abdominal muscles aren't going to be as strong, blah, blah, blah. Men evolved one way, women evolved another way. That's just how it is. But when it comes to video games, you can actually break the rules a little bit, such as Zarya from Overwatch being very strong, but that can be explained by in the future with hormone treatments, and also certain drugs, certain diets, just the general evolution of man. Maybe actually woman would kind of be able to even out. And it's actually possible. I really think so, that maybe somehow, some way, that a woman would be able to be the strongest person on the planet. It is possible in the future, theoretically, sci-fi and fantasy, but right now that is not the case. That will not happen anytime soon. Not naturally right now. So that's just how it is. But can a woman beat a man in a sword fight? Yeah, but I guess if you were to theory craft and put everything together, like, everything is even, they have the same amount of training, the same amount of everything. Actually, yeah, a woman could beat a man, but there's a lot of luck that goes into certain things like that. Certain sports actually have a lot of luck, like hockey to basketball, blah, blah, blah. I think generally basketball is seen as a less luck-based sport, where something like hockey is much more luck-based. Even though there's no dice rolling or RNG, it is such a complex game that, yes, there's more upsets. So is it possible that a woman who is vastly overpowered and maybe even debatably outskilled, no, yeah, a woman could still actually win? And historically, that has actually been the case. When it came to European historical duels, women have won, competed with men, and it's like, obviously, it's not going to be the case all the time. And in terms of if we were talking about esports or something like that, if you win sometimes, barely, but lose vastly, basically all the time, is that even competing? That's what we're talking about. So could a woman in a video game, if it's gender lock class, should they not be allowed to be berserkers then? I think that, well, first it's a video game, so they can do whatever they want. for style points. And also these games are fantasy or they're sci-fi. They actually generally do have reasons why these characters are the way they are. Not all the time, and I wish it was explained, especially, and this happens in movies too, which I really don't like, especially movies that don't have magic. It's like, why is this little girl able to fend off 3 grown men who are apparently trained mercenaries? No, that shouldn't happen, you know, and especially handedly. No. And in video games, sometimes you do have these situations where it's, no, that shouldn't happen. But in terms of fantasy, sci-fi, magic, stuff like that, if we have potions that can make us see in the dark, then I really want to kind of extrapolate from the Zarya example, where like in modern medicine, modern diets, modern human evolution, if we go and like, you know, you have certain diets, things like that, and I believe this is actually the lore of Monster Hunter, if I'm not mistaken, but eating certain things, obviously magical potions or just magic in general, magical wuxia martial arts, stuff like that, then yeah, it could totally be possible. You know, if there's a mushroom that gives you strength, why couldn't a woman who grew up in the wilds of the North Mountains, you know, eat these magical mushrooms her whole life and just be a strong woman, be a berserker who's very in tune with nature, things like that, and her ancestors. And you know, it can be, it's realistic. I know it's fantasy, but because it's fantasy, that makes it realistic. Not always. A lot of games don't do it like that. And that's not the reason why they do it, like I've already mentioned. But yeah, no, I get it. I totally get it, actually. But I think that in general, though, you know, yeah, I mean, if they're going to gender lock a class, it should be like a big boy. Should be a big boy. Why not? There's nothing wrong with that. And if they're going to have a rogue class, it could be a girl. Why can't it be like a little kind of rogue elf girl? And that's a big thing. Again, we're totally okay with different races. Like generally it's elf archers, right? Orc warriors, you know, and maybe we'll have like a human engineer, but generally it's dwarf, right? So we have these fantasy races that are basically, they're humanoids and they're very human. Even the ones that look monstrous, like Taurens, they actually are based off of like the Native Americans, or they're based off of like human cultures, and they have in some ways human physical properties. But if you notice in a lot of games, and this is a big problem I have actually with non-class games, is that sometimes the human, even though you have customization of hair and skin, you don't actually have customization of their full physique. Like if I want to be a big human, I have to be an ogre, I have to be an orc or a giant or a Norn, you know, it's basically a whole different race. But humans come in all different shapes and sizes. But that's the thing, guys, is when you play these games, in a way, they all are human, you know? An elf is a human. It's a humanoid, it is a person, and people can look like elves. There's people who are born that totally look like elves. There's people who are born that look like orcs. There's people who are, I don't know, maybe not Tauren, you know, we don't have horns or anything like that, but you know what I'm saying? Like there are people who embody these personalities and physical traits as well. So yeah, and that also just happens in really any game, even with you know, general non-gender lock classes. Is the human, the Norn or the giant is the giant. And I think that kind of sucks in my opinion. I wish there was more variety even within the races. You know, like all orcs being like a shade of green. I'm sure there's way different shades and way different face shapes, and there's so many different kind of orcs that can come out. Why do they all got to look the same? You know, that sucks. Humans in World of Warcraft, you know, they all look like wrestlers. Why is that? What's going on with that? Anyways, but yeah, is gender lock classes realistic? I think depending on the game and how realistic they're trying to be, it could be. Like men generally should probably be this berserker, the warrior, the knight class. But it's kind of interesting. In games like BDO, you do have characters like the Valkyrie class. But that's sort of like a culture difference. That's a total character role play difference. But I think generally, yeah, maybe girls would probably not use bigger weapons. Girls would not be using, you know, giant pole arms, maybe a lighter spear. I don't know, probably not generally the heavy armor classes. I think they would be more gymnastic, things like that. But when you enter into the fantasy realm, yeah. So I would say that if you are going to have gender locking, then yeah, maybe put girls, I guess if you wanted to have it a balance, put them in the more magical roles. But that also sucks because guys can totally do magic too. But I guess give us a different kind of magic. Technically, guys, men's eyes tend to be different. Men's brains are a little different. I guess like girls are better at organization, things like that. So if you want to have differences, I guess realistically debatable, not really, but you could have subtle changes in the different kind of classes. Don't be like, okay, the girl is the necromancer and the guy is the general sorcerer or elemental mage. That's, you know, like basically, I kind of like how BDO does it, where it's like there's two classes and they are very similar, nearly identical, but the girl has a slight difference. The girl maybe is a little bit more magic based or a little bit more ethereal or a little bit more nimble, and the guy is a little bit more brute strength. They're almost identical, but there are subtle changes and differences, and I actually really do appreciate that from a gameplay perspective of having a little bit more variety. So if I want to play a guy or a girl, I am playing a different character, but also in terms of realism a bit. But again, I think really I just want to end the video by saying it's a game. They can do whatever they want. It's fantasy. You can really come up with any solution, or why is that girl strong? Why is that working? But I do wish they reflected that. That's the one thing I want to end on, I guess, is that it can be realistic. It's fine. Even in modern day, a woman, peak woman performance versus like an average man or something, I don't know. They can do certain things, but no, there is physical differences. Just please keep that in mind. Physical differences, men are stronger. Women potentially could be more gymnastic, debatably, or more nimble, more smaller frame, lighter, things like that. But, you know, in a game, you do whatever you want. But I wish that, so in some games, and BDO, where I kind of congratulated it, did a bad thing, where it's like, there is guy and girl versions of things, but it's like the girl, like a girl Black Knight, doesn't really look, I think, the way a Black Knight would look. It's very pretty, it's very cutesy, and again, that's artistic, whatever, it's fantasy. You could even say that the class is actually more of like, almost like a witch, or like the sorcerer is actually a brawler class, but it's because she's magical. So I guess you could even explain that away too. But I just kind of wish maybe that, I think that a lot of games, they don't really convey it strong enough. Or like in Overwatch, Zarya, she's a strong woman because you can literally tell she's a strong fucking woman, you know? You can tell that. You can see that. Same thing with Doomfist versus a lot of the other characters, right? Lucio is a nimble character, so he's short, he's skinny. Doomfist is tall, freaking muscular. Totally different physiques, totally different races, and that is incredibly, you know, telling as well, I think, for the character, the kit, mechanically, and the story. I think that's just more apparent, but in a lot of these Eastern games, basically you'll have a little girl with a big sword, and there is no magic to be explained. There is no reason why she can do this exactly. So, you know, if we look at a game like Diablo, the Berserker girl does look like a big, strong girl, and you can kind of explain it away in your head canon or whatever. But yeah, I don't know, some games I don't think do a good enough job. It's just pretty girl with a big sword, or it's a guy, like Guild Wars 2 Norns being able to be thieves is kind of strange, I think. Also, I think Char being able to be Mesmers is a little weird, debatably. I don't know, it's just some certain races and things, it just doesn't quite thematically fit. And I actually really do appreciate when we have hard race and gender locking. I'm fine with it. I'm okay with it, but I'm actually really cool. I love when they lock classes to races, because when races are so physically different, that's a whole nother video to talk about, right? Kobold would probably be one of the best thieves, right? Like a kobold would be a great thief. And then why would you have a giant thief? That almost, or like a giant stealth class. That doesn't make sense. You're not going to have a rogue Tauren. Please, God, don't show me anything from private servers. I don't want to see it. You know, like, so I think maybe these Eastern games should go a little bit more similar to Western games, not in adopting, I would say, like non-gender lock classes, but if you do them, give it more distinct story, give it more distinct personality and aesthetic so that it makes more sense. But at the same time, it's fantasy, it's artistic integrity, you know, do whatever you want. And even to a point, I think that it would be a disservice, actually, if a game like Blade and Soul or a lot of wuxia games actually had muscular women more so than the effeminate and dancer-like women, because that is their magic, that is their fantasy, and that would actually ruin their lore and world building. So it's an incredibly touchy subject. Is it realistic or not? It's going to be, just like the answer to every video like this, depends on context. Oh my God. It depends on context in terms of how realistic you want to be, how fantastic you want to be, and what fantasy you want to live in. Yeah, sorry to say that. But basically, the moral of the story is there is difference. Men and women do have differences. They are physical differences, and games should use that to their advantage. instead of just ignoring them, that's definitely for sure. I promote that and have these differences. You know, I'm definitely a big proponent of adding sexuality into games. That's why I do applaud Blade and Soul. And games that do have like, you know, a big ogre class. And it's like, yeah, no, they are the berserker. That just makes sense. They are physically different. They're the ones that are physically capable of doing this in this magical world. It just makes a big difference. And in terms of the silhouette, the character, the design, and the kit, it allows your personality to shine more through the gameplay than through this really facade of the avatar that you guys want customization to, and you want to inject your own personality or create personalities, but sometimes it's better to have these limitations, and that breeds creativity, especially inside of gameplay, where the gameplay is your paintbrush. You tell your story through pressing those buttons. Yeah, anyways, so that's what I gotta say. Kind of a long rant. Hopefully you guys saw where I'm coming from. Yeah, I'm cisgender normative male, but I paint my nails, like plush animals, stuff like that. I could be effeminate. I could be very manly. Generally, I don't know. Maybe this is just an American perspective. Maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe it's a race thing. I don't know. I don't know if I really want to talk about that. I just want to let's just talk about games. It's a gameplay thing. I get it. It's silly, but at the same time, I do think more games should take real world or realism in mind when they build their magics, when they build their characters. And so when we build our characters and we play in this world, it feels more real. We bring the fantasy to life. That's the moral of the story that I want to make. So am I in favor or out of favor of gender lock classes? It doesn't matter to me. It honestly does not matter to me. It's all in context. What kind of game is it? What kind of world is it? And what kind of person do I want to be today? Yeah. So much love, friends and family, whatever person you are today, now. Hopefully friendly in the comments below, keyboard warriors. And yes, women can be keyboard warriors. That is not a gender lock class. But yeah, much love, guys. Keep the hype alive. And what are your favorite class designs or games that have different class elements or classless? Do you like gender lock classes? Which ones do you go to? You know, I guess for me, BDO. I think BDO does a decent job. I think it's pretty okay. So that's it. Keep the hype alive. And I will see you again next time.